And if dragons were around since the flood, we should see them in history, shouldn't we? I mean, let's be honest, if you saw a dragon, wouldn't you write it down or tell somebody? Sure you would. And the one longest continuous history of any nation, short of the Bible, okay, of any nation, is Chinese history. And the Chinese history is full of dragons, isn't it? And it talks about how they actually bred dragons, and the emperor would have dragons pull his chariot in parades. They had a court dragon. They used the dragon's saliva to actually make ink and perfume. Oh no. But anyway, if they wanted the dragon to drool to get his saliva, they would wave roasted sparrows under his nose, because that was the dragon's favorite food. See, history can be fun. Anyway, so, and even Marco Polo, when he went there to see the East, to the Orient, he talks about seeing dragons as he goes across the steppes of Asia. And that's in the 700 AD. So they haven't been gone that long. They've been around until recently. In Gilgamesh, it talks about Uruk slaying a dragon in India. That's a Roman mosaic at the top showing you some plesiosaurs. The guy at the bottom, it was called a lindworm by peoples in the, from 1000 to about 1600 AD. And one of these was killed, stuffed, and put into a scientific museum in the 1600s in Italy. And think about it, the 1600s was when the pilgrims were starting to do their thing and come over here. So these guys have been around fairly recently. And Beowulf killed the dragon, and called Grendel, or Grendel, however you want to say it. Nothing like the movie from what I understand. I didn't see the movie. But if you look at the description, Beowulf killed a T-Rex. It stood up like a man, had big jaws, and 2 little claws for arms. That's a T-Rex. And then he wrenched off its arm, had a compound fracture, and it went back and it died. So this is, they call them Grendels, and there's actually places in Europe still named for this. In Switzerland, they have Grendelswald, which is Grendel's wood. A T-Rex lived in that wood. In England, they have Grendelsmere, which is a swamp that Grendel lived in. Okay, so there are still places named for these different dragons and where they lived. It hasn't been that long ago. St. George killed a dragon. Up until, well, Indians, Native Americans, heritage is full of stories about thunderbirds. Thunderbirds are pterosaurs. And these pterosaurs apparently used to, winged lizards, used to actually eat people, which isn't good. And they have all sorts of stories about how the Braves had to get them in their caves and then smoke them to death and stuff because they couldn't kill them otherwise, and they kept eating people. And there's all sorts of stories about those. But actually in the 1880s, when the Pony Express riders rode across the western United States, they killed one of these, cut off its clawed wingtip, carried it into Flagstaff. The whole town turned out to see it, and it was carried in the newspaper. There is an actual picture, and this is in a national park out west, and there's a picture of a pterosaur that the Native Americans actually put on the rock. They were building a tunnel in France in 1856, and they pulled out a live Pteranodon. He had black oily wings, 9-foot wingspan. He shook his wings, he croaked, and then he croaked. He probably lived in a cave in the mountain, and when they were blowing the hole through the mountain to build the railroad tunnel, they pulled this poor little guy out, and he got hit by the rocks. There have been thousands of people that have seen the Loch Ness Monster at this point, because they finally built roads along that, and that's why they see him. They're not just in Loch Ness. We have them here in Lake Champlain in Vermont. There's the Lake Erie Monster. There's the Lake Iliamna Monster. There's Ogopogo in British Columbia. There's Izzy in Japan. These are a bunch of plesiosaurs. By the grace of God, they like cold, deep water, so we don't have to worry about them. But there's a bunch of plesiosaurs still around today. They're not all gone. And this is a picture that some missionaries were in the Outback in Australia, and the native people said, hang on just a sec, the native people said, don't get near there. If you do, the Yaru will get you, and it eats people. And so the missionary said, what's a Yaru? And they drew that picture for him. And I showed that picture for years until my students showed me that the maiden that they ate is in the stomach. You can actually see the person in the stomach, which I thought was rather humorous at best. Anyway, so they've been plesiosaurs that were not very nice there, and there are still probably dinosaurs in certain areas, like Mokili Momimbi lives in the Congolese rainforest in the Likawala swamp. The University of Chicago spent over $250,000 sending Roy Mackle to get evidence of this one's existence. It's just a group of Brontosaurus type dinosaurs that lived, but this swamp is the size of the state of Alabama. It's a big swamp. And so that's why nobody has seen him. Some people have seen him, but nobody's gotten a successful picture of him. And so there's some pretty interesting stuff about that, but that's a whole nother story. The evolutionists believe that the dinosaurs ruled the earth and that there was a asteroid or a meteorite that hit the planet and it caused ash and aerosols to go all over the planet, and in the wave that went around, it drowned all the dinosaurs, and then the ash and aerosols caused an ice age to form, which killed more of the dinosaurs. This is one of the common stories that we're told about what happened to the dinosaurs by the evolutionists. And they say that because of what they see in the rocks. When they look in the geologic column, they see the extinction of a lot of animals in the fossil record. They see this trauma that occurred. They see the ice age. In other words, they see everything that the Bible says. I just want you to connect that in your mind. They see everything that the Bible says happened. They just make it longer. And so if you know what I'm trying to teach you guys, then when you have a friend that likes dinosaurs, you should be able to say, yeah, man, I like dinosaurs too. I believe they got on Noah's Ark and they got off Noah's Ark, and that everybody died that was outside of the ark that didn't swim really, really well, because that was the first judgment. And the only ones that survived were the ones that trusted God and got in the ark that he provided. And then you can turn around and say, and you know what? The next time it's going to be by fire. And we're going to all be under the wrath of God because we're all sinners. But he loved us so much that he sent Jesus as our ark. Jesus died on the cross in our place so that we could be right with God and that we will be safe through the next judgment, which will be by fire. And that way, dinosaurs become the missionary lizards God meant for them to be. Everything should be a way to share Jesus. Now, those are dinosaur footprints up the side of a mountain. How did they get there? I want you to think about this for a minute. I guess I really didn't go over with you how dinosaur footprints can stay in the rock. See, because if we go to the beach and we run across the beach, do we leave our footprints in the sand forever? No. But during the flood, it was like running through wet cement, wasn't it? So during the flood, those dinosaurs ran across there and it was like wet cement. And then more layers were laid down. And then at the end of the flood, God pushed the mountains up. And now you got dinosaurs, footprints running up the side of a mountain. Does that make sense? You should be able to start using the information I've given you and think through a lot of this stuff to be able to figure out some of the weird things that you'll see. They found T-Rex red blood cells. They found actual T-Rex red blood cells, and they've been trying to prove they're not T-Rex red blood cells. And actually, more recently, she found DNA that's still functional. Mary Schweitzer, I guess you say her name, she found DNA still intact. I didn't know reptiles had DNA in their red blood cells. We don't, but apparently they do. She found the DNA still intact, and they actually found collagen because they were trying to say, well, it had to be bacterial remnants because it can't still be there if it's millions of years old. They found collagen. Bacteria doesn't have collagen, and it's still stringy. It's still snap to it. So it's messing with the evolutionary world right now because of some of the stuff that they actually have been able to find.